Hello, everybody. How are you tonight? Thank you so much for coming out in this fine Cape Breton spring weather. The smell of the apple blossoms, the chirping of the birds, the sound of the snowplow down the lane. Welcome to the CBC Candidates Debate for Sydney-Glace Bay. My name is Steve Sutherland. I am the host of Information Morning on CBC Radio in Cape Breton, and I am pleased, honored, and privileged to be your moderator for the events here tonight. As you can see, we have a crowded field. We have a lot of questions to get to tonight and a limited amount of time to do it in. So we're going to get right down to business in this brand new riding of Sydney-Glace Bay. Here's how the format works. All the questions are going to come from me as your moderator. Each candidate will have precisely 1 minute to answer the question at hand, and then we move on to an open discussion and debate directed by me among the candidates. The order of speaking off the top is a random order determined by draw earlier today from left to right across the stage. We will cycle through that order through the course of the evening so everybody gets a first shot and a last word. And a note on timing, when I say that they have precisely 1 minute to answer the question at hand, I mean precisely. I'll be watching the clock. And when you see my arm go up like this, it means whoever's speaking has 15 seconds to finish off what they had to say. And then after that point, I hit the bell and then we move on. We're going to go for about 2 hours, give or take, over the next little while. We are live streaming, so hello to everybody who's joining us in the live stream tonight. We're live streaming on the CBC Nova Scotia webpage, the CBC Nova Scotia YouTube channel, and this will also be living on afterwards. Online if anybody would like to see it or if you know somebody who missed it. So greetings to everybody who's live streaming tonight, and thanks to everybody who braved the snow on this fine April day to join us here at Center 200. A note on the role of the audience. Of course, the audience is essential to the course of this debate, both those of us who are here and those of us who are watching on the live stream. I will note that this is not a campaign event. It is a debate. So while we encourage you to show your support of the people and the things you're hearing on stage, we would ask you to keep it reasonable. We would also ask you to refrain from interrupting or calling down any of the candidates while they're speaking or afterwards. We're looking for an inclusive environment. The goal here is for people to make up their minds about who the best person is to represent them in this riding. Anything that interferes with that is counterproductive. So we're looking for an open, inclusive debate. Keep in mind, too, not everyone in this stage has the benefit of a campaign team or funding behind them, so we're looking for everybody to feel comfortable, no matter who they're representing or what brought them to the stage here tonight. So we appreciate your cooperation on that front. And speaking of no interruptions, you're about to encounter something that is very rare. Over the next 2 hours, no phones will ring, no texts will ding. No notifications will come on. You can enjoy blissful silence, just like we're going back to 1991 as we enjoy the political conversation happening tonight. My phone is on Do Not Disturb, so if you could pick flight mode or Do Not Disturb or turn your phone off, that would be greatly appreciated by us, by the candidates, and by the technical team here who is recording it for broadcast. So without further ado, let's get into your new riding of Sydney-Glace Bay and tonight's debate. So to introduce your candidates, again, this is in order determined by random draw earlier today. From your left to right across the stage, Joe Ward, running as an independent. Representing the Liberal Party, we have Mike Kelloway. For the Conservative Party of Canada, Anna Manley. For the Canadian Future Party, Chris Gallant. Jeff Evely with the People's Party of Canada. Kim Losier with the NDP. And we also have Nick Boisvert on the far right for the Marxist-Leninist Party. I should also mention, too, that we do have a Libertarian candidate, Michael Pittman, who is not able to be here in time for the debate tonight. So we're going to go ahead now with our candidates debate for Sydney-Glace Bay. Our first question is a straightforward question. Before we dive hard into the policy issues this evening, we're going to start with something that gets to the very heart of what brought you here tonight and what led you to put your name on the ballot. I am asking you, essentially, tell us why you think you'd make a good member of Parliament. What is it about your campaign, what is it about your experience that makes you think that you deserve people's vote? So tell us why you would make a good member of Parliament, starting with you, Joe Ward. You have 1 minute.
Well, my name is Joe Ward, and the last time I was on this stage, I was running for mayor. And now, over the course of 192 days, I'm running in 3 elections. And some people have got to be thinking, this guy gets beat down, he keeps getting back up, when is he going to stop trying? And that's exactly what I want the folks in Ottawa to think when I start knocking on doors and persistently asking for things. Failure is just temporary. You keep trying until you succeed. Okay? We're in a system where the parties would have you believe that there's only 2 choices. There's only choices among the actual parties. And an independent voice can't stand out. I don't believe that. It comes from something like, if we think of the book 1984, there was the idea of doublethink. And we would simultaneously believe that we have to vote for parties while also being dissatisfied with them. I think an independent voice that shows my resilience can be fantastic in Ottawa because I won't stop knocking on doors. Thank you.
Joe Ward, thank you very much. Mike Kelloway, 1 minute on why you think you'd make a good MP.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for CBC for putting this on tonight. For over 30 years, I've been a community activist. I was brought up in a coal mining community. My mom and dad taught me early on to give back to the community that's given you so much. Over 35 years, I've been focused on developing initiatives with people throughout this riding, whether it's Bay It Forward, a group that has done great work, whether it is the Cape Breton Regional Hospital Foundation, where we did succeed in getting money for a cancer center that is so important to so many people, and also the Seniors College that was out in CBU that provided so many great services to people in Cape Breton that are seniors. And as an MP in Cape Breton Council, just last year alone, we brought $525 million of investment back to Cape Breton Island. That focuses on Tartan Downs, that focuses on the airport, that focuses on things like dental care, where I was front and center. And I will continue to fight, because that's what I am. Work ethic and a fighter and delivering for the people of Cape Breton.
Mike Kelloway with the Liberal Party. For the Conservative Party, Anna Manley.
Thank you, Steve. So I have been a lawyer and a business owner. I've been a lawyer for 10 years, and I've been a business owner for 15 years. And when you run a business, you understand a few things. One is that service is the most important part of everything that you do. If you do not call people back, if you do not provide a good service, you lose your customers, you lose all your clients. So it's really important to call people back, and that accountability is something that I feel is missing from government and something that I would bring to the table, listening to people's concerns. You also understand as a business owner that the management of funds is extremely important. If I were to run a deficit in my business for 10 years, my business wouldn't last that long. So we need a good fiscal management, and that's what business owners can bring to the table. I also have 2 kids here. I want my kids to be able to stay here, so I definitely have skin in the game on this island.
Anna Manley of the Conservative Party of Canada. Why do you think you'd make a good member of parliament? Chris Gallant with the Canadian Future Party.
Well, I grew up in New Waterford, son of a coal miner. Long and short of it, I'm not much different than anybody sitting in this room right now. I've got a mortgage, car payment, stack of bills. You know, I see the cost of living going up faster than my paycheck is. I have a strong willingness to listen and understand people. I have an ability to work with almost anybody to achieve a common goal. I'm not going to tell you I'm going to fight for you. I can fight when I have to, but most times we can work it out with compromise. It goes a lot farther than fighting. And I've tried to live my life in service to groups that have given to me, whether it be my church or my union, and I'm looking for a way to give back to a community that's given to me.
Thank you very much, Chris Gallant. Jeff Evely, representing the People's Party of Canada.
Well, I grew up in Cox Heath. I joined the military when I was 22. I did a 20-year career, and we're at war. But China wages war by another means. For the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without any fighting. And I happen to be a little bit more attuned to this than most people because I haven't missed a war yet. First Afghanistan, then Iraq, and now the Canadian Communist coup, which is actually a global communist coup. For the Chinese play Go, whereas we play chess. And in Go, the aim is to capture all of the opponent's pieces, all at the same time, dominating the entire board and making it so that your opponent can't even move. And it's a silent war, and it's an invisible war, but we've already taken more casualties than all the wars of the 20th century combined. So I'm the only one with the experience. I'm in it for the right reasons, and I've already committed to donating the majority of my salary back into the local community, just to show that I really am in it for the country.
Jeff Evely of the People's Party, thank you very much. Kim Losier of the NDP, what do you think would make you a good member of Parliament? 1 minute.
I have over 30 years' experience in business management. In the last 12 years of that, I've been working in corporate finance. I understand economics, and I understand how far your dollar's going to go. I want to make sure that you have enough money from your paycheck to pay for your basic necessities. We should not have to need a credit card to go to the grocery store just so that we can feed our family. I want to make sure that your dollar goes further. I want to make sure that I invest back into the community that has given so much for me. I come from Ontario, and I moved here because I fell in love with Cape Breton. I fell in love with the people, I fell in love with the place, and I've been here over 18 years. I don't plan on leaving, and I plan on staying here and making sure that I can do everything in my power to make sure that you can afford to live. People with a job should be able to afford to do the things that they want to do. With my corporate finance, I know that with all my cooperative banking, I can help it get there. We can work together, we can make sure that this place will be here for everybody.
Kim Losier, thank you very much. And to finish off this initial round, Nick Boisvert, what makes you say you'd be a good member of Parliament representing the Marxist-Leninist Party?
Gosh, I wish I was as cool as the PPC thinks commies are. I believe I'd be a good MP because I have a strong grounding in the reality of the working poor in Cape Breton. I have never once had a salaried job, and as such, every hour of every paycheck is essential. I believe that my experience trying to muddle through it with a child, maintaining a family, trying to rent, trying to own a home, trying to keep car payments up, has me keenly aware of how hard it is here, but also keenly hopeful for what it could be, because I know our history here. I remember the union background we have. I remember William Davis and Cody and Tompkins, and I believe that we can bring back that spirit to Cape Breton.
Very good. Nick Boisvert, thank you very much. So now we open this up to an open discussion among the candidates directed by me. We're going to go for 4.5 minutes, and starting us off is Joe Ward.
Well, I introduced the idea, or I mentioned the idea of resilience and how I keep coming back and trying this, and I'm kind of, we're seeing decades that Cape Bretoners have to be resilient, like from the 60s of decline. I just want to pose the question to Mike and Anna. There's a huge amount of money that comes into this province that is supposed to be distributed to the municipalities, and I'd like to know why they haven't responded to the Nova Scotians for Equalization Fairness on their position.
Mike or Anna, would you like to respond or talk about why you'd be a good MP?
Well, first and foremost, let's address the question. I've met many times with the NSCF, met with Father Maroon, met with Russ Green. I share their ambition that we need to bring more investment, but we differ on how to do that. I'm focusing on building collaboration, working with different levels of government, focusing on making good things happen, like $525 million to Cape Breton Island. But I respect their views, but we differ in how we get there.
How about you, Anna Manley?
Ultimately, this comes down to the question of what is the role of the federal government. The role of the federal government in the equalization program is to distribute the funds to the province, and the province, the duly elected province, their government, Tim Houston, of course, can do with those funds what they will. And if you don't like it, you can, of course, re-elect a different government. But I actually think that the provincial government's doing an excellent job spending more money on healthcare in Cape Breton in particular.
Okay, the question is, what makes you think you'd be a good MP? Thanks to you for both responding to that question. Who else would like in? Chris.
So one of the reasons I chose the Canadian Future Party is that MPs will be allowed to speak their mind on any issue that's important to their constituents. So though I'll be a member of a party, I'll still be an independent voice for the people of Cape Breton.
Kim Losier.
Speaking on that, every NDP MP that you elect into Ottawa is another voice that's speaking for you. We are not speaking for the high-class billionaires and millions out there. We're speaking for the everyday Canadian, especially the everyday Cape Bretoner that is struggling to just afford to live.
All right, Jeff Evely, then Mike Kelloway. Jeff?
Yeah, I don't think that we elect MPs to represent us when they go to Ottawa, because party leaders can strip MPs of their party status if they don't toe the party line. We saw that with Derek Sloan from the Conservative Party, so we're actually electing MPs to represent their party. PPC is very different from that. The candidates are allowed to disagree with the party leader and say whatever it is that we think, and I've already tested that theory because I broke all of the rules for social media for candidates already.
Nick Boisvert, then we're going to go to Anna Manley.
It's terrifying. So as someone who isn't beholden to a large tier party, if I'm elected MP, there is no party line to toe so long as the motivation behind my actions fight for the working class people. I don't want to take away from anyone that has the structure and organization to do it, but I will intend to pull things back to the workers rather than billionaires.
Okay, Anna, then Mike. Anna?
I think this comes back to proof of work. So if I've been nominated as the Conservative candidate for almost a year, it'll be a year at the end of this month, actually very close to the time of the election. And me and my team have knocked on thousands and thousands of doors and actually engaged with Cape Bretoners. We've been active in doing that and listening to those concerns. I'm bringing some of those concerns here today, and I will definitely bring all of those concerns forward to government. And honestly, most of it is the cost of living. It is the cost of living. That is the central issue that I hear.
All right, Mike Kelloway.
And in fact, I've been working on affordability measures where it's $10 a day daycare, dental care, which is health care writ large. We've invested $325 million to the provincial government to administer health care. It's not about giving up your values, it's sharing values. It's sharing Canadian values. The Liberal Party represents Canadian values from coast to coast to coast.
Anyone else on your values as an MP? Joe Ward.
We talk about unconditionality of federal equalization transfers. We kind of get hung up on that. You know, the Conservatives will talk about being fiscally conservative and responsible with our money. We have to make sure when $3.6 billion comes to Nova Scotia that it makes it to the municipalities where it's supposed to be spent.
All right, we're going to finish with Jeff Evely. We're almost done.
If we're going to talk about affordability, the price of housing has gone through the roof in the last 10 years because of mass immigration. Nobody else is going to say that on this stage. Maxime Bernier was calling that out in 2018, and when I knock on the doors, everybody's talking about the cost of living, the price of housing, but they don't want to say that we need to put a moratorium on immigration. I said it.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone, and that closes that conversation on our opening question. Getting a sense of how that flows, gang? The open discussion and debate. Catch my attention if you want in on the conversation, and thank you very much for paying attention to my direction and my traffic control. Our next question for the evening for your candidates debate for Sydney-Glace Bay is on your leader. Why is the leader of your party the leader for you and the best leader for Canada right now? We're going to get 1 minute from each of you as we rotate through this order on your leader, starting with Mike Kelloway of the Liberals.
Well, Mark Carney is not a politician. He's not a lifelong politician. He's someone that has worked throughout the world, but in particular in Canada. He has a unique set of skill sets that he's pragmatic, but he also understands the economy. He also understands people. The first conversation I had with him was in my home in Sydney River, picked up the phone and gave him a call. And we chatted, and he talked about the fact that we need a stronger economy because a stronger economy will allow us to invest in more social programs. Those programs, folks, for those listening, are affordability programs. Think of the hub as affordability and the spokes as affordability measures. That $10 a day daycare makes the difference to that family. Dental care, health care, the whole 9 yards. It's about investing in people. He has the skill set. He's a man for the times right now. We need someone to stand up to Donald Trump who has the skill sets to do it, and he's doing it already within a month in the job.
Mike Kelloway and Mark Carney. Anna Manley, what makes Pierre Poilievre the leader for you?
Well, Mark Carney is not a politician, but he is a banker. And as a banker, he doesn't care about me, he doesn't care about you, he doesn't care about anything but money, okay? Now, money is very important, obviously, but Pierre Poilievre cares about Cape Bretoners. He has been here 3 times. He came here twice during the leadership. He came here once after that to meet with Cape Bretoners. He came to community organizations, soup kitchens. He met with builders in this community. And he came and he spoke to Cape Bretoners, and he stayed with them the entire time. And he listened to every single one of them until the line was done. And these were people, not your typical conservative voters. These are people with tools in their pockets, regular people who wanted to come to speak to him, and he listened to all of their concerns. Second, when I look at him, I see a person who is a hardworking couple, him and his spouse, and their two beautiful children. I see my family, and I see a lot of similarities between them. Hardworking people trying to make this country better.
Very good. Anna Manley on Pierre Poilievre. Chris Gallant, you're with the Canadian Future Party. What makes Dominic Carty the leader for this country at this time?
Well, first and foremost, he lives in New Brunswick, so he's a maritimer like the rest of us. He actually worked here in Cape Breton for former MP Michelle Dockrell as a staffer. But I think what draws me to Dominic is his integrity and his values. We've seen him step down from a cabinet position in the New Brunswick government when he disagreed with Premier Higgs. We've seen him leave his position as the NDP leader in New Brunswick to join the PC party before that because he didn't agree with what was happening in the party. I also like his commitment to the evidence. What do the numbers say? That should drive our policy.
Very good. Chris Gallant with the Canadian Future Party. 1 minute now from Jeff Evely on Maxime Bernier and why he's leader for you.
He's the only one with any integrity or courage. He left the corrupt Conservative Party after they rigged the leadership election in 2018. He's the first one to call out mass immigration. He's the first one to say Canada first. He is the only one to have been standing up to the human rights abusing, mass murdering mandates over the last several years. He defied every one of them, he traveled despite the travel ban. He's been arrested. And he has been taking the government to court in order to get accountability, which is something that we really need in this country. We need accountability for the human rights abusing mandates if we are ever to heal as a nation. And People's Party is the only one that's calling for that.
Very good. Jeff Evely, thank you very much. Kim Losier of the NDP, 1 minute on Jagmeet Singh, why you're a supporter of Jagmeet Singh and why you think that's the person to lead us into the next 4 years.
Jagmeet's always been for the people and not for corporations. He actually has ties to Atlantic Canada. He's got ties to Newfoundland, and he knows the struggle. If you know his personal story, you know that he worked 2 jobs to put himself through college, on top of stepping up for his family so that he could be there to take care of his younger siblings when his family couldn't. So he understands what it's like. As a single mom who works every single day, I know the struggle. And I feel that we have that connection because he knows what it's like to be there for the everyday person, to make sure that your rights are protected, that your dollar will go further. He knows what it's like, and how can you not support somebody who wants to be there to support you?
Thank you very much, Kim Losier. Nick Boisvert on the Marxist-Leninist Party and why your leader is the leader for the country right now.
Well, I honestly truly don't believe that Anna DiCarlo will ever be elected Prime Minister, but I think that has a fair amount to do as well with the fact that we don't have proportional representation, that we don't have means of electing people in a way that isn't beholden to towing a party line, that isn't beholden to only one party getting the majority of say in any actions that the government takes. A vote for me is very much a vote for me independently because we all know that there are not going to be an abundance of communists elected through the country, as much as we'd love to. But we also understand the promise of doing what we can as individuals for each of our ridings and not necessarily promising to toe a party line, but promising to work our best for the working people of the ridings we represent.
A forthright answer, embracing reality. Thank you very much, Nick Boisvert. Joe Ward, obviously you're running as an independent. You can interpret this question whatever way you like. Perhaps you'd like to tell us why no leader is the leader for you. Joe Ward, 1 minute.
I think we can actually make a selection on a leader. I mean, it's going to either be Pierre Poilievre or Mark Carney. And in terms of my thoughts, you know, it's probably Mark Carney is going to be the steadier hand at the wheel. There's going to be questions. We're going to have to hold them to account. But there's just a feeling about Pierre Poilievre that I don't really trust. There's something off about it. He dips too far to the right, and you know it's concerning sometimes. So the key is the polling is showing that the Liberal government is most likely to win this election. With that in mind, do not fear casting a vote for an independent. If we are not going to decide the election in this riding, then you have an opportunity for a local voice, and I will keep whichever prime minister in check. I will speak the voice of Cape Breton people. I'm not a common sense conservative. I'm a common sense Cape Bretoner.
Joe Ward, thank you very much. We're now going to engage in 4.5 minutes of open discussion debate among the candidates directed by me on who is the best leader for this country right now. You can feel free to talk more about your leader. Perhaps you'd like to try to convince us why another leader is not the one for you. Or maybe we're looking at issues of strategic voting, as Joe Ward brought up. So we're going to start right now with the person we started the question with, Mike Kelloway, and then everybody get in on it after that. Mike Kelloway, start us off.
Thanks, Steve. And one of the points that was brought up was that Pierre Poilievre supports Cape Breton, is fond of Cape Breton. Bill C-49, not too many people know about this, but it was green hydrogen, setting up a green hydrogen sector predominantly here in Cape Breton that could bring potentially thousands of jobs. He voted against it. He voted against school food program. When he goes to food banks and he goes and gets the photo op, he goes against every policy that lends itself to affordability, to helping people. There's a dissonance there. There's an insincerity there. So who is the real Pierre Poilievre? Because his voting record suggests
that
otherwise.
Sounds like something for you to answer.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. I really like that we're talking about food banks because under the Liberals, we have experienced a decrease in our standard of living and a significant sharp increase in the usage of food banks. Cape Bretoners have attended food banks more often. Thank you. Cape Bretoners can barely afford to eat. Inflation was at 30%. The cost of living has risen so much that people can hardly afford food. No, I'm not just talking not to afford putting their kids in hockey. I'm talking about not being able to afford food, and that is unacceptable.
Nick Boisvert.
Thank you. So I think Mike Kelloway is great. That said, I think Mark Carney, as a banker who owns the mortgages, not a great choice for folks who are desperately trying to afford their homes. I also think that Pierre Poilievre, who fought for years against le wokisme and has gone through so many slogans on his podiums that we can't really tell what he's about these days, but it sure isn't suits not boots.
Jeff Evely, briefly.
Well, that's something we can agree on. I think that, yeah, Pierre Poilievre is just a pandering professional politician. He's not a right-winger. I'm going to say, like, I'm a right-winger. That just means that I'm an individualist. I put individual rights before group rights. Socialists tend to put group rights before individual rights, and that tends to lead to a lot of tribalization and problems in our society. Pierre Poilievre is basically the same as the Liberals. I can't tell the difference between him and Justin Trudeau, but Carney is evil. He's in bed with China. They just came out with that with the Election Security Task Force yesterday.
Perhaps evil descriptor might be a little extreme.
Greedy and evil,
Mike
yeah.
Kelloway of the Liberals.
Well, I'm not going to dignify that comment with a remark, other than to say this. Look, I think that everyone on this stage brings a set of values and goals and principles. I can tell you that Mark Carney has one goal. We're not going to be the 51st state. We're not for sale, and we're going to craft a new economy for the 21st century under a person that actually knows what they're talking about.
Okay, we're going to go with Chris Gallant of the Canadian Future Party, then Joe Ward, then Anna Manley. Chris?
So I think we're seeing an important point brought to light here that if you're a conservative in the House, you'll vote against a Liberal policy, and if you're a Liberal in the House, you'll vote against a conservative policy. Doesn't matter if it's good for your people or not. That's the problem with our system right now. That's what we need to change.
Anna Manley of the Conservative Party.
Liberals have spent the last 10 years handcuffing our economy, halting our energy sector, and making Canada weaken in this position that we're in right now. And we can talk about Donald Trump, we can talk about what Carney thinks he wants to do, but the fact of the matter is that Carney has stated he has no intention of repealing the anti-pipeline legislation. Conservatives will build the pipeline, we will bring energy industry back to Canada, and we will bring prosperity to Canada.
Okay, quick response from Mike Kelloway, then Joe Ward. Mike?
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, the Liberal Party built a pipeline. But let's go back to the green hydrogen opportunities here in Cape Breton, where we can be what Alberta is to oil and gas, we can be to the world for green hydrogen, and Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives said no to Cape Breton.
Joe Ward, briefly.
Hey, you know what? It makes sense that we're talking about the financial situation of the country right now in this election. But here's the thing. When can you remember Cape Breton or the CBRM doing well? Since the 1960s, we've been in decline, and when our population finally upticks, it causes a housing crisis locally. I bet you every party that was in power since then would tell you they did a good job and that they were fighting for us. Why don't we give independence a try so I can hold any party in power to check?
Anna Manley?
The party in power for the majority of that time was the Liberal Party of Canada.
One last quick word to you, Jeff Evely.
Economic warfare is a key line of attack in China's unrestricted warfare strategy. The Chinese Communist Liberal Party of Canada is waging war on Canadians with Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau is just the Wizard of Oz. Mark Carney is the man behind the curtain.
We're out of time, Jeff. Thank you very much. The rules only work if everybody listens to the clock. I'm sorry, I know we can't always get everything in we want to say. Thank you all very much for the conversation on that point. Some of these points we can return to through the course of the evening. All right, next up, we're going to continue on some of the themes that came up in that conversation. So, to introduce our next question, I'm going to take the liberty of adapting a metaphor from a previous prime minister. Let's talk about the elephant who is not in the room. World markets roiled last week with the announcement of new tariffs from the United States. There have been threats of economic annexation and a desire to see Canada as the 51st state. Our question to you, and you're going to be starting us off in this, Anna Manley, what would be your approach to dealing with Donald Trump? So on the tariffs, on the relationship with the United States, with President Trump, what would be your approach to dealing with Donald Trump? 1 minute from each of your candidates in Sydney-Glace Bay, starting with Anna Manley. Anna.
Well, I can say that the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, and the second best time to plant a tree is today. The Liberals have had 10 years to increase Canadian independence by allowing our energy sector to thrive. Instead, they have spent that time dividing Canadians, handcuffing our energy industry, lowering our productivity, and beating up on small business. We need to be strong against Donald Trump, and in order to do that, we need to be economic. We need to have we need to have a strong economy. And if we aren't strong in the economic front, we're not going to be able to stand up to Donald Trump. We send 98% of our crew down to the United States. If you're a business and you only have one customer and that customer doesn't want to buy from you anymore, you're not going to have anywhere to sell. We need to build the pipeline, and I stand behind Pierre Poilievre's vision for doing that. I also think that we need to increase investment in Canada, and we have a plan for that. A resume is not a plan. Right? We need to increase investment in Canada, so our plan for an additional $5,000 in TFSA room.
Thank you very much, Anna Manley. Oh, you can talk right up to the bell if you want. We just ask that you stop when it goes. Chris Gallant of the Canadian Future Party, let's talk about Trump.
So the first thing we need to do is stop talking so much about Donald Trump, because he loves that. If we allow him to dominate our politics, are we really a sovereign country? You know, I think every time there's a mention of 51st state, we expel an American diplomat. Every time our prime minister is called a governor, we do the same. It sends a message. It's time for us to move on. The United States has shown it can't be trusted. So we need to move on with our allies who we know can be trusted, who share our values, and look to build new trade relationships with them.
Thank you very much, Chris Gallant of the Canadian Future Party. On our relationship with the United States and the Trump situation, Jeff Evely of the People's Party of Canada.
Well, I think this demonstrates that all the other parties are the same, and we're the only ones that are unique, because we're going to work with Donald Trump, just like Mexico came to the table, just like Vietnam came to the table, just like Japan came to the table, and they're all making deals now. Our politicians have no records to run on, so they would rather run against Donald Trump, and it's all fear, 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 war, war, war. That seems to be all they ever want to do. You haven't suffered enough. You people need to keep suffering in order to support our political leadership, when really they should be the ones protecting us, making deals like sensible, grown-up nations are already doing.
Jeff Evely, thank you. On Trump, Kimberly Losier of the NDP.
The NDP is always going to put people first. Dealing with Trump, he's unpredictable. You have no idea what that man is going to do and when he's going to do it. He's got this thing for profit and billionaires, and he's got his hands in everybody's pockets wanting to pull these strings like a puppeteer. We are not going to play down to him, but we do have to support the workers. We need to make sure that we have those safety nets put in place, so if the shit does, if it does hit the fan, that
Kim,
we have...
it's the CBC.
I know. If it does hit the fan, what are we going to do as a party? What are we going to do to make sure that our workers are protected? We have to be there for them. We have to have those safety nets in place. We saw that with COVID. We need those safety nets so that the regular working class people have something to fall back on, and we have a policy for that.
Kimberly Losier of the NDP, thank you very much. We talk a lot of that. We just try not to say it, Kim. Nick Boisvert of the Marxist-Leninist Party on Trump.
Well, Marxists have a very clear history of dealing with fascists. We're not a big fan of them. And frankly, there are plenty of fascists who espouse plenty of Trump's same ideologies right here. If we don't deal with what's going on here, that Trump is just as similar to as, frankly, Pierre is, given he spent years telling us how great Trump is, what are we even doing? I think it's important that we deal with the issues here and the issues that Trump wants to push here as separating us from each other, the pushing for corporate profits, the pushing against trans folks, the pushing against immigration, the pushing against queer people, brown people, anything, DEI. It's ridiculous that we've let it get this far, and we need to acknowledge as a country that we need to stand together, and that is enough to stand against fascists.
Nick Boisvert, thank you very much. Joe Ward, 1 minute on the United States and Trump.
Donald Trump and Elon Musk are absolute fill in the blank. The 51st state stuff, we don't really have to worry about, and I'll tell you why. He likes to get a reaction. If there's one thing he's good at doing, it's getting a reaction, okay? We do have to worry about the tariffs. But another great thing about Donald Trump is that he's volatile. And right now he's harming his own people in the United States. He's tanking his own stock market. He's putting pressure on his own people. We're eventually going to see layoffs on his own people. What's going to happen is he's going to be a huge success, and he's going to try to save face and start to calm things down. So we just need to take a steady reaction to him, calm things down, and don't get too volatile. Because if we lob things at him, a volatile person will react in a volatile way.
Joe Ward, thank you. Finishing off the first round of 1 minute each from your candidates on Donald Trump and our relationship with the U.S. And what do you think is the best approach? Mike Kelloway of the Liberal Party.
Well, we heard it here tonight that resumes and skill sets doesn't matter to have in a prime minister. Of course it does. We are at a pivotal point in Canada's history, in the world history. We're on the epicenter of a recession. The fact of the matter is that Mark Carney, first week, met with prime ministers throughout Europe to carve out new opportunities in terms of trade. He broke down trade barriers within the provinces. You want someone who has skill, who's secure, who's stable, who's ready to lead. All of those points that I just made. You know, when you think of Pierre Poilievre, I think of one thing. I think of many things, sadly. But I think of, why will he not get his security clearance? Every other leader has got one. We need it now more than ever.
Mike Kelloway, thank you. So we're going to enter 4.5 minutes of open discussion and debate directed by me on the issue of Canada's relationship with the United States, and specifically asking our candidates, what would be your approach to dealing with Donald Trump? Feel free to carry through some of the themes that the 7 of you just raised in the initial conversation. So 4.5 minutes of open discussion. Don't forget, get my attention if you'd like to get involved in the conversation. And we're going to kick off with Anna Manley of the Conservative Party of Canada.
I think it's very convenient that Mark Carney is all of a sudden ready to lead the country when he just arrived back here. Now, we have a plan to encourage investment in Canada. Okay, we need a quick boost to the economy because, as Mike said, we are entering into a likely recession. And in order to avoid that or lessen its impact, we need to remove capital gains for the next year. That is our plan. If you invest money back into Canada, we will remove capital gains for the next year. So there's going to be $5,000 of additional TFSA room if you invest it in Canada. We need to be strong against Donald Trump by investing in Canadians.
Kim Losier of the NDP on Trump.
Speaking to Anna Manley, investing $5,000, how many regular Cape Bretoners have an extra $5,000 kicking around every year?
Who has capital to get gains on?
Anna, feel free to respond.
Regular Cape Bretoners work at businesses, so those Canadian businesses will have that $5,000. The TFSA program is a nationwide program. People can invest the money in, and then Cape Breton workers will have the benefit of those strong businesses.
All right, Kim Losier with the NDP, then Nick, then Jeff. Kim?
So the NDP also has an economic plan to help boost the economy in Canada. They're called Victory Bonds. And they start at $50. Every Canadian, every Cape Bretoner, I'm pretty sure can afford $50. We all remember what it was like when your grandmother would give you that gift and you got that Canada Savings Bond and you waited for it to mature. Those are also tax-free. But you don't have to have $5,000 in order to do it.
You wanted to get on this, Nick Boisvert?
Oh, I just, that covered it.
Okay, Jeff Evely of the People's Party of Canada.
So we wouldn't be in this mess with the United States if the Conservatives hadn't cut Maxime Bernier out of the rigged leadership race back in 2018, because he's the one that's been talking about supply management and how the dairy cartels control the supply of milk, poultry, and eggs so that the prices are artificially high for us and they don't allow the Americans to sell their dairy products in our country. And so that was a key issue at the initial NAFTA negotiations that the Liberals renegotiated during Donald Trump's last term. He's back asking for it again, and now we have 7 times the number of terrorists, suspected terrorists, who's crossing into the United States from Canada as are crossing into Mexico, despite the sheer disparity of total numbers at each one of those borders.
All right, we're going to go to Joe Ward, then Mike Kelloway. Joe Ward, Independent.
When we talk about an extra $5,000, we're talking about a national platform. We're reading the party's platform. We're promoting the party's platform. We have to think about the Cape Bretoners who live here. We have to, even if our candidates represent a party, we need them to talk about the local situation, not what Pierre Poilievre or Mark Carney want them to say. Let's get back at home and put the focus where it's supposed to be.
Mike Kelloway of the Liberals on Trump and our relationship and how you'd handle it.
One of the things that was brought up was that Mark Carney wasn't around. In 2008, Stephen Harper called upon who? Mark Carney. Mark Carney to lead the economy. We had one of the softest landings in the G7 in terms of a very, very hard recession. Mark Carney has the experience. Yes, resumes do matter. Skill sets matter. And passion, commitment to this country matters.
Nick Boisvert of the Marxist-Leninist Party.
I'm sorry, I was so thrown by supporting Stephen Harper for a second. You're going to have to just switch.
I'm
I
sure
had a
Mike would
plan.
prefer you not quote it that way, but did you have something to add?
It was to Trump cutting so many of his federal regulatory boards that wanting things to come here from them is a nightmare.
All right, Anna Manley of the Conservatives.
I think that what Mike Kelloway meant was the late great Jim Flaherty when he was talking about Mark Carney, because it was Jim Flaherty that led us through the 2008 financial collapse. And I also think that the Liberals want you to forget the last 10 years. They want to say Donald Trump boogeyman. They want you to forget the last 10 years. They want you to forget how they have divided you, how they have hurt our economy, how they have handcuffed us and made us weaker against the Americans. They want you to forget all of that. I'm here to remind you.
Response from Mike Kelloway of the Liberals.
I think it's interesting about the 10 years of darkness. The 10 years of darkness were when the Conservatives cut Enterprise Cape Breton Corporation, cut the fishery to the bone, cut border security, the party of law and order, not so law and order.
All right, one brief last word to the NDP candidate, Kim Losier. Very brief, please.
Okay, the one thing that you don't want to forget is that Pierre Poilievre, he's got a right-hand man, Jamal Giovanni. You all probably heard his name, MP out of Durham. He's literally was roommates with J.D. Vance. Do you really want that kind of person to be leading the country
All right,
against
that ends
Trump?
discussion on that point. Thank you all very much for your participation, and thanks for your thoughtfulness. Have a drink of water, take a second. You are following CBC. If you're watching us in the live stream, you're watching us in the CBC Nova Scotia website or the CBC Nova Scotia YouTube page. My name is Steve Sutherland. It's Tuesday, the 8th of April. We're in the middle of a nice spring snowfall here in Cape Breton, so we've taken refuge at Centre 200 for the newly formed riding of Sydney-Glace Bay. We have your candidates on hand in debate over the issues in this campaign. Your candidates are Joe Ward, Mike Kelloway, Anna Manley, Chris Gallant, Jeff Evely, Kim Losier, Nick Boisvert. There's also a representative of the Libertarian Party, Michael Pittman, who was not able to make it in time for the debate tonight. So thank you very much for joining us on the live stream now or in the future. Next up, we're going to get 1 minute from each of the candidates, starting with you, Chris Gallant, and the Canadian Future Party on affordability and cost of living. So Canada has just emerged from an extended period of high inflation, just in time to contend with the potential onset of another period of high inflation in the trade war with the United States that we were just talking about. We're starting to see another spike in prices of basic essentials like groceries in the grocery stores that's being recorded right now. A new survey from the Mental Health Society says that nearly half of Canadians reported increased anxiety over the past month, with most saying the primary cause is the rising cost of living. Our question to you, starting with you, Chris Gallant of the Canadian Future Party, what will you do to address issues around affordability and the cost of living for your fellow Cape Bretoners? 1 minute, starting with you, Chris.
So the single highest cost for most Canadians is their mortgage, their home. So our party has a plan to build affordable housing quickly, working with the provinces and the municipalities to create homes on Crown land at first, and then we'll see from there. We also have a plan to create a royal commission to study our tax system. It hasn't been looked at in over 60 years. We think those who can afford to pay a little more should pay a little more, and those who can't afford to pay should pay a little less. We want to reduce costs by eliminating some of the protections we see in some industries in Canada. So thinking of air travel, telecommunications, a lot of our groceries at the store. We'd like to eliminate those protections to bring the prices down for people.
Chris Gallant, thank you very much. On the issue of affordability and cost of living with the People's Party of Canada, 1 minute from Jeff Evely.
Well, as I stated previously, the one thing that would bring down the cost of housing is if we put a moratorium on immigration. And if there's one thing that can save this country from economic devastation, it's pipelines. Now, Carney loves pipelines because he invests in oil down in the United States, in Brazil, and in Nigeria, but he doesn't like our pipelines because if our oil is allowed into the global market, then that's going to compete with his interests. So his assets are going to be valued lower if we are allowed to compete with him on the world stage. Now, the Chinese Communist Liberal Party of Canada has done everything they can to destroy our prosperity by blocking pipelines left, right, and center. We're going to assert federal jurisdiction over pipelines, and we're going to start driving energy east. We're going to repeal all the legislation that stops oil tankers from going into northern BC so we can get our Northern Gateway pipeline, and we're going to work with the Americans to get Keystone XL up and running.
Jeff Evely, thank you. As a representative of the NDP for Sydney-Glace Bay, Kim Losier on affordability and the cost of living.
So your everyday bills are hard. It's hard enough every single month to try to figure out how you're going to pay everything. Are you going to have to pull up that credit card to go and get groceries? So the NDP wants to put a cap and tariff-proof our groceries so that fees are not going to be added on to that. We also want to remove the GST off your everyday bills, so your cell phone, your internet, your power. It may not seem a lot, but that 5% off of each one of those bills is money back in your pocket. It helps to stretch your paycheck to make sure that it can go to the end of the month so that you're not sitting there trying to wonder how you're going to feed your family, or you're going to play, rock, paper, scissors, which one do I pay today? Because it shouldn't be like that. We shouldn't have to decide whether or not we're going to heat our home or feed our family every single month.
Kim Losier, thank you very much. On affordability, Nick Boisvert of the Marxist-Leninist Party.
In a poll of business leaders in January, 50% said that they were preparing for layoffs in the face of the trade war. Over the pandemic, profits ballooned out of control for private companies. None of it was unpredictable. Capitalist monopolists have been doing this as long as there's been capitalism. We simply let them do it by not taxing them into submission, by not making utilities and essentials a public good. Housing, we should have absolutely public housing that isn't absolutely inaccessible for folks. It's absolutely absurd that we have simply allowed the myth of trickle-down economics to persist. We all know it's not true. Wealth flows upward. When you give it to the folks who need it most, they will spend it directly in their communities. It's essential that we give folks that wealth to spend in their community.
Nick Boisvert, thank you. 1 minute from you, Joe Ward, Independent.
We're not going to have a moratorium on immigration. Canada accepts people from multiple cultures, but there is a problem with the last government. We let too many people in too quickly without the infrastructure ready. The leading cause of unaffordability everywhere now is housing. And we see it on a local level, which we have to keep thinking about as well, with the number of students that came into CBU too quickly, driving the local rates up. We're already a poor economy here. So people really, really are struggling at this point because of that. So we have to make sure that we keep those levels at a sustainable level for the university to do well, but also to make sure that the people that are here, including the students that come themselves, can afford to live here, and we can have affordability on a local level. And one final note, when we have a pot of money that's supposed to come here, we need to make sure that it gets here.
Joe Ward, thank you. On your actions on affordability and cost of living in this riding in Cape Breton, Mike Kelloway with the Liberals, 1 minute.
Thanks very much. Some really great discussion here tonight, and everyone's contributing. It's really great. I would say this. One of the key pieces in our platform is a low and middle tax cut for the two different classes here. Now, we've been focused on making strategic initiatives, which we have. So that tax cut for the working class is essential. Mark Carney's promising that. But here's something that's happening, folks, right now in terms of housing. We are on the cusp of a major, major housing development in the Tartan Downs project. This is going to help alleviate. It's not the only solution. We're investing in probably 3 to 4 large-scale housing initiatives throughout the CBRM. We're on the cusp of that. We do that together. This is not a Mike Kelloway thing or an Anna Manley thing or anybody. This is about the community working together and working together for a common goal. That is to ensure that everybody has a safe and secure roof over their head.
All right, Kelloway, thank you. So to finish off this initial round of 1 minute from each of the candidates on affordability and cost of living and what you would do to address those issues here in Cape Breton, Anna Manley of the Conservative Party of Canada.
So the Liberals are trying, again, to make you forget that they printed a bunch of money and jacked inflation up to 30%. They're trying to make you forget that milk doubled in price, that butter was up to $9 a pound, and that $150 of groceries, instead of feeding your family for a week, only fed your family for a few days. And that is still going on. People are still feeling the impact of that inflation. They want you to forget that in the middle of this cost of living crisis, they put on a carbon tax. And that carbon tax is still on the books. They have only paused the collection of that carbon tax. They have not repealed it, they have not removed it, and they have not committed to removing it. And when Canadians cried for mercy on that carbon tax, when they said we can't afford to live, the Liberal government, instead of listening to Canadians, decided that they would keep it on. Our plan is to decrease taxes for average Canadians by 15%, to cut income taxes by 15% for average Canadians, and to fix the budget to stem inflation so that Canadians can afford to live.
Anna Manley, thank you very much. We're going to continue the flow here. 4.5 minutes of open discussion and debate. Give me your signal if you want to get in on the conversation. Thanks for paying attention to my direction on affordability, the cost of living, and your action on that in this riding and on this island if you were elected. We're going to start with Chris Gallant of the Canadian Future Party.
So we heard lots of mention of government programs, tax credits, things like that. Something that our party sees as a problem is there are barriers in place to accessing those. It can be difficult for people. So we want to look at those government programs and streamline it, make sure people get the money they're entitled to, the credits they deserve, make it easy for them.
Mike Kelloway, then Jeff Evely. Mike?
I think we should have maybe a fact check meter here. The reality is that Mark Carney didn't pause the carbon price. It's over. It's over. We're focused on finding other ways to cut emissions and putting money in the pockets of Canadians. To say that it's paused and it's not the law of the land is incorrect and quite false.
We're going to get to you in a second, Jeff, but I want Anna to respond to that.
There's no such thing as an executive order in Canada. I thought we weren't going to be the 51st state. So the carbon tax has not been repealed.
It's called an order in council.
Mark Carney did not call Parliament back in. The carbon tax is still legislation in place. It has only been paused, and there is no guarantee that they will not, after elected, conveniently put it back in
Mike,
place.
we have to get someone else in on this. Jeff Evely, then we'll come back. Jeff?
So, yeah, the carbon tax really is paused, but, and Pierre Poilievre can criticize Carney for that all he wants, but he's never going to say that he's going to pull out of the Paris Accords. We wouldn't have any obligation to implement carbon tax in the first place if we didn't sign the Paris Accords. So PPC is going to pull us out of the Paris Accords. That's enough of this nonsense already. People need to be able to buy groceries. They need to be able to buy housing. And it is the government that's making everything worse for everybody all of the time.
Okay, we're going to get to Mike and Anna in a second, but Nick Boisvert, you wanted in on this?
Carbon taxes aren't even the most efficient way to fight climate change, and it's a little crazy that this is the biggest issue because we have the option to build new green power and we're not doing it. Instead, we're fighting over a carbon tax. Additionally, climate change is real.
Mike Kelloway, then Anna Manley. Mike with the Liberals.
Climate change is real for sure, something the Conservatives deny consistently. I see it every day. In the first week of being the Prime Minister, he stopped the carbon price, but he also got his security clearance. In 1 week, folks.
Anna Manley.
Talk about a fact check. So first of all, we do not deny that climate change is a thing. We just have a different way of going about it. Instead of handcuffing Canadian industry, we want to rely on Canadian innovation. I also want another fact check, because every time the Conservatives challenged the carbon tax, including when it was on home heating oil, Mike Kelloway voted in favor of that every single time.
Mike Kelloway, then if anyone else wants in, get my attention. Mike Kelloway of the Liberals. And we are talking about affordability here.
It was Mike Kelloway who got home heating oil exempt from carbon pricing and also put in place heating pumps for those that can't afford it, and for those that can, a 10% off on home heating. So listen, We have been committed to focusing on climate and focusing on jobs within climate, something that Pierre Poilievre said no to for Cape Breton.
All right, we're going to, Kim Losier of the NDP, you want to know on affordability, cost of living?
Pretty sure they've just gone after themselves.
All right, Jeff Evely, the People's Party?
Yeah, climate change is real. Anthropogenic climate change, not so much, as in man-made climate change. And we only make up about 1.6% of the global emissions, whereas China makes up 35%. We could probably reduce more carbon from the atmosphere if we really believe that carbon is the problem. Temperature actually leads carbon and not the other way around. But the rotting forests will release about 115% of the carbon that burning fossil fuels does in Canada. So why don't we just manage our forests to stop forest fires and eliminate that carbon that way?
All right, we're going to move on, and I will say we will have more chance to talk about carbon and climate change a little bit later on this evening on affordability. Kim Losier?
No, that's fine. I'll wait until the end.
Okay, Anna?
The child poverty rate in New Waterford is 39.8%. That is unacceptable. That is absolutely unacceptable. The inflation and the policies of the Liberals of the last 10 years have hurt seniors, they have hurt our working families, and they have hurt people who are struggling just to make ends meet.
All right, coming out of that, last word to Mike Kelloway of the Liberals. We're almost out of time. Make it brief.
And when it comes to any program we put forward for food security, Pierre Poilievre forces his party to say no. No to food security. No to food in the tummies of children.
And that ends discussion on that topic on affordability and cost of living. Thank you all very much. And as I said, we did have on the agenda tonight a conversation about climate change. It seems fitting to perhaps roll into that right now since we have a bit of momentum there. Your next question to our candidates, and kicking us off for 1 minute each, is going to be Jeff Evely with the People's Party of Canada. A question on the issue of climate change. What is your assessment of Canada's climate change obligations? What is your approach when it comes to carbon reduction? So we're going to be continuing a conversation we had earlier this evening, but on climate change and your approach to climate change and our obligations therein, we're going to go with Jeffrey Evely of the People's Party of Canada. You have 1 minute.
So I don't believe that carbon causes temperature changes. It's the other way around, whereas solar activity, lunar activity, magnetosphere activity actually cause temperatures to raise, and it's the ocean that releases most carbon into the atmosphere. As the ocean heats up, it releases carbon. But the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, which is part of the UN, most of their auditory boards, their auditing boards, by the way, are dominated by the Chinese, and they insist on applying a model that has essentially a constant solar output, whereas there are 27 other models that they could choose from that where the output changes, and it is the astrophysicists who are much more accurate at predicting changes in climate. They have to call it climate science now because it's not climate theory, because they haven't had any predictions come true. It's a fraud to get the West to destroy itself economically, and China will continue to build 2 coal-fired power plants a week. And
thank you very much. Jeff Evely on climate change of the People's Party. On your approach to climate change policy, and the most effective mechanisms to deal with any obligations that you agree with, Kim Losier of the NDP.
Well, climate change is real, but the NDP wants to cut the tax breaks and subsidies for big oil and big gas. With that, that's going to be $18 billion that is going to be into the federal government that we can then help to retrofit homes here in Canada for those working class, those homes that do need to have some energy efficiency put to them, for new windows, new doors, and then we're going to invest in clean energy so those homes could get those heat pumps put in. That's $18 billion over 10 years. This is not pocket change. This is a lot of money that oil and gas is taking that we can invest in clean energy.
All right, Kim Losier, thank you very much. On climate change and climate policy, Nick Boisvert with the Marxist-Leninist Party of Canada.
Oh boy. So an entire campaign up to very recently when Donald Trump got into office was run on axe the tax and very little else. And honestly, if your entire policy is being run on cutting a climate change initiative, then what do you really stand for? You've replaced it with pipelines. There's not a whole lot there telling me that you actually care about the future of this planet. Honestly, it's a little absurd that it's still a discussion when we could just move forward and build more sustainable initiatives, build more green energy. It would cause like a huge boom in jobs to start building towards these things. It would be so beneficial for all of us to start here with green initiatives, to start with green homes, to start with green energy, to change the way we see this from a personal responsibility to getting rid of subsidies for fossil fuel companies. There's much more I could say, but I'm riled up.
That's the clock. Nick Boisvert, thank you very much. On climate change and climate change policy, running as an independent, Joe Ward, your approach.
You know, the policy for carbon tax actually had a good motive behind it, but whether or not the policy works ultimately doesn't matter when Canadians don't want it. And it's probably a policy that probably toppled Justin Trudeau. We obviously have to invest in cleaner technology, but I want to take it back to a local perspective. When we talk about doing windmills offshore Sydney, in the Sydney Bight, we also have to make sure that we're recognizing the needs and the concerns of the fisheries and make sure that when we do that, we do it in a responsible way. And with something like Bill C-69, we don't want to eliminate it completely and tear it up. We just have to make it more efficient so that any type of natural resource we're developing, we're doing it responsibly, but more efficiently as well, because the economy has to be fleet-footed to adapt.
Joe Ward, thank you very much. Mike Kelloway, we invite you to continue the conversation on climate change policy, and how it contrasts perhaps with other candidates. Go ahead.
I have no doubt that the Conservative candidate to my left believes that climate change is real. The problem is her party simply doesn't. I've seen it close up. I've seen it in committee where there's denial after denial. So we do have a problem, but we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to offer programs to incentivize people to buy green. We also have an opportunity to really build on some of the great businesses out there that are going green and encourage others to go green. That is actually oil and gas companies. Many oil and gas companies, not all, but many are focusing on how do they green, how do they become more greener. That may be pivoting their business model. And first and foremost, when we go back, and I really want to take this discussion back to Cape Breton as being an energy hub for green hydrogen. It's real, folks. There's a real opportunity here. So hopefully all parties can agree that climate change is real, and we have a huge climate opportunity right here when it comes to renewable energy in Cape Breton Island, the best island in the world.
Anna Manley of the Conservative Party, 1 minute.
Well, thank you for saying my name. I think Mike Kelloway actually forgot it for a second there. It's interesting that you talk about incentives, because that's what the carbon tax was. It was an incentive. When the Liberals say incentive, they actually say force you to do something. They want to use tax policy to force you to be green, to force you to change your behavior based on a tax. And this is a very stark contrast between how the Liberals and the Conservatives approach a solution to an issue. Climate change is an issue, but it's not the only issue. We're in a very serious economic situation right now. The answer is not to handcuff our economy, it's to have faith in Canadian innovation. We are the country of the can-do reactor, and we have the ability to create a green economy without actually hamstringing our economy and hurting Canadian workers and taking away Cape Breton jobs. All we have to do is have the government get out of the way and allow it to happen naturally. That's the difference between the Conservatives and the Liberals.
Anna Manley of the Conservative Party of Canada. Of course, we can pick up this conversation a little bit later during the open discussion and debate, but we're going to finish off this first round with Chris Gallant of the Canadian Future Party on your approach to climate change and climate action.
So the Canadian Future Party is all about evidence-based policy, and climate change is real. The data's there. We believe that it is a danger to humans, to Canadians, but we're also the party of truth, even when it's ugly. And we know that only democracies will fight climate change. We need to protect our democracy first and foremost, economically, militarily. So we are supporting the construction of a west to east pipeline. And with that, we would like to create a fund, an energy fund, to set aside profits from that to fund our shift to green energy in the future.
Chris Gallant, thank you very much. We're going to move on now to open this up to an open conversation and debate moderated by me among your 7 candidates present in Sydney-Glace Bay. What's your assessment of Canada's climate change obligations, and what's your approach when it comes to climate reduction? Starting with you, Jeff Evely of the People's Party of Canada.
Well, as I've said, I'm not particularly worried about it. I mean, people are freaking out over carbon, but the carbon that humans actually put into the atmosphere, into the carbon cycle, is about 4% of the total, and we only make up about 1.6% of that.
So what are you proposing when it comes to climate policy in this country, I guess?
I think we should drill, baby, drill.
Nick Boisvert of the Marxist-Leninist.
So Every bit of science suggests that we need to leave fossil fuels in the ground now. Any party that is supporting a pipeline, particularly one that goes through Indigenous territory, is spitting in the face of both climate science and Indigenous reconciliation. It is just not feasible to say those two things at the same time. If we've deregulated any sort of company, they have universally taken every opportunity to exploit workers, to exploit the law. Fossil fuel companies knew about climate change in the 70s and have covered it up since.
We're going to move on to Anna Manley of the Conservative Party.
Thank you. I think that if we were actually to ask Indigenous communities about what they wanted, they would tell you that they would like to extract the resources that's on their land. And we have a program called the Canadian Indigenous Opportunities Corporation that will provide loan guarantees for Indigenous communities that want to take advantage of those resources and bring themselves up out of poverty.
All right, Mike Kelloway.
After you deny residential schools were a problem.
Mike Kelloway, and then Jeff Evely. Mike?
As someone who's had the privilege and been humbled to work with First Nations leaders, to treat them as a monolith is quite disturbing. First Nations are unique. They represent many parts of this world. They're the first Indigenous, they're the first Indigenous to here. The reality is that there are many needs and many wants, and we do that nation to nation, not in a paternalistic way.
Jeff Evely, you want to back in from the People's Party on climate policy?
Yeah, I mean, there were about 20 different Indigenous bands who actually signed on to the Northern Gateway Pipeline. Trans Mountain Pipeline was a similar situation. So there are plenty of Indigenous bands out there who are all for their own prosperity. I think we should let them have it.
Kim Losier of the NDP.
Like I said when I first said this, there's over $18 billion in subsidies for big oil and gas over 10 years. Did you know that you could actually retrofit 3.3 million homes and help them save almost $4,500 a year? Those are big money. This is not something small. That's $4,500 a year savings for every single Canadian out of those $3.3 million home if you remove those subsidies on big oil, big gas.
Anna Manley of the Conservatives.
Canadians lead the world in mining expertise and petroleum expertise. We are world experts in it. We export those engineers to other countries to extract the resources. We should be able to do that here at home because clean Canadian gas should be able to get to markets, and the only way to do that is with a pipeline that we will build.
We're going to go to Chris Gallant, then Nick Boisvert. Chris?
So I think we have an opportunity here with the current climate in the United States to get the climate experts and scientists who are not happy living there to move here and help us to innovate.
Nick Boisvert.
Clean oil and natural gas is a myth.
Mike Kelloway, did you want to get back in on this?
Well, the fact of the matter is, I think Canada's the greatest nation in the world, and we can do both things at once, not one in isolation of another. That's what makes Canada the best country in the world.
Joe Ward, then Jeff Evely. Joe Ward.
Realize it's going to be a transitionary economy. We can't do frack, baby, frack, and we can't do net zero in 30 days. Like, there's going to be a transition period. We have to keep that in perspective, so it shouldn't just be all of one or the other.
Jeff Evely of the People's Party.
We could go net zero and get rid of 1.6% of 4% of the Earth's carbon. But if we were really that worried about carbon and carbon taxes, then you would think that we put those carbon taxes on Chinese products because their products are the dirtiest and bloodiest in the world. Ours are the cleanest. I'm not saying that we're the perfect guys, but we're the best.
Again, on action that we should be taking to address carbon policy or not, depending on your point of view. Anna Manley.
Just in a rare moment, I actually agree with Joe Ward here, because we should have a very slow transition, because in Cape Breton here we have Lingan and we have Point and Coney. These are the largest power producers for the province. These are Cape Breton jobs. If we just shut those down without a plan, we're going to be losing those jobs.
Very good. Anyone want to have the last word? You have 10 seconds. Nick Boisvert, very briefly.
We replaced those jobs with public green initiatives. 11 years ago, I was told that the world would be ending because of climate change. And frankly, given the amount of natural disasters, climate and weather related, it looks that way. So we could do it now. We need to do it now.
Thank you very much for discussion on that point on climate change from your candidates in Sydney-Glace Bay. Everybody have a drink of water, have a rest. Thank you. Good conversation, everybody participating. Thank you very much. Don't forget, if you'd like to get in on the conversation, the open discussion debate, grab my attention, and we'll keep it moving. Thank you so much for your cooperation on that. Up next, we're going to bring it down to the local ground now and think about this riding that you're hoping to represent here in industrial Cape Breton. What are a couple of your most pressing priorities for Sydney-Glace Bay? What action will you take as an MP to address them. So your most pressing priorities for this riding and action that you would like to take. It's kind of a dynamic question. You could bring it whatever direction you would like. And we're going to start off this conversation 1 minute each from each of your candidates with Kim Losier of the NDP.
So there's three main issues that are affecting the people of Cape Breton. It's housing, affordability, and healthcare. There are not enough doctors to support the community. There's not enough houses for us to live in, and I know this firsthand, because after Fiona, I was homeless. And I was not homeless because I did not have insurance. I was not homeless because I didn't own a home. I was homeless because there was not enough houses to put people in after an emergency. And that's where the problem lies. Being homeless for 7 months was devastating. And it's not like I could go to a hotel. They were booked. We were sitting here in a huge crisis after a major disaster, and I didn't have a place to live. Thankfully, I had friends that were going to pitch in and help me out, but for 7 months, I was homeless. So when you're wondering what homeless looks like, it looks like me.
So one of your priorities is housing.
One of the biggest is housing, and it's affordable housing. It's housing that the everyday Canadian can afford.
Gotcha. Nick Boisvert, the Marxist-Leninist Party, your priorities for Sydney-Glace Bay and what you would do to act on them if you were elected.
Honestly, I feel like in line with the Marxist-Leninists, so much of what this community would benefit from would be nationalizing and returning everything to public ownership. When we have control of the means of production, we can be in charge of whether or not layoffs are a thing rather than trusting a billionaire. We can be in charge of who builds the houses and whether or not they're condos and luxury condos built or they're homes that we can actually afford to live in. If there's a national housing program, a national energy program, a national transit program, it guarantees that everyone in Canada chips in and everyone in Canada gets back.
Nick Boisvert, thank you very much. Joe Ward, your priorities for Sydney-Glace Bay and what action you would take on them.
So I was in Halifax 2 weeks ago, and I see that Halifax looks like it's becoming Toronto right now. When you compare the two municipalities, you see there's a big gap. We talk about equalization. I think sometimes people maybe misunderstand it, but there's actually something we can do. I don't like that the party representatives feel powerless to it. I can go to the Department of Finance in Ottawa and knock on a door, and I can do something without legislative change. I go in and I say, take that massive spreadsheet that you have every year that you calculate how much comes to Nova Scotia, and do me one favor. Send a letter to every municipality in the country, but certainly in Nova Scotia, that tells them how much of that pot of money that comes to Nova Scotia was generated by your municipality. Now, Cecil Clark and the CBRM would have a document that has authority from the Department of Finance that would tell them how much they're entitled to, and they can go to Tim Houston and negotiate and say, we're supposed to get this, but it doesn't look like it. What can you do for us?
Thank you very much. Joe Ward. Mike Kelloway, your priorities for Sydney-Glace Bay.
I think there are many. One is increased money for housing. We're doing that. Increasing money to the province who administers healthcare for healthcare and mental health. We're doing that. We need to do more of that. Here's something that I think we have a huge opportunity, folks, and for those watching and listening at home. I think that there's a huge opportunity for a Coast Guard presence, a significant Coast Guard presence in Sydney. We have the asset of the Coast Guard College, we have the municipality, and we have the First Nations community member too that are very supportive. That's something I'm working on now. That's in progress. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. It tells you that each and every day when I wake up, there's a list here in my pocket of the priorities for Cape Breton. It's something I take with me in Ottawa, but more importantly, it's what I do when I'm here in this community.
Mike Kelloway, thank you very much. What priorities have you identified for Sydney-Glace Bay and the campaign trail and in Manley, and what would you do about them? 1 minute.
So the cost of living is still the major issue that I hear from people when I'm out talking to Cape Bretoners. I hear the cost of living is the major issue still for them. That includes housing, of course. And the higher cost of living means a lower standard of living for Cape Bretoners. So bringing down the cost of living is my absolute top priority. And that is, I think, a natural fit for the Conservative government. Families and hardworking people and seniors struggling to afford things need to be able to afford their food, their housing. A working senior, something that we will do, a working senior can earn up to $34,000 in tax-free income. That's $10,000 more in tax-free income. That's a real solution. And that's, thank you. And also a 15% tax cut for your average Canadian. That is a real solution. What the Liberals are offering is they're offering more government dependence, they're offering more government solutions, but actually this is putting money back into the hands of Cape Bretoners to allow them to make the decision for themselves. We also need to diversify our local economy, bringing in more businesses, and as a business owner, that is a major priority for me because businesses mean jobs, and jobs mean prosperity for Cape Bretoners.
Thank you, Anna Manley of the CPC. Chris Gallant of the Canadian Future Party, your priorities for Sydney-Glace Bay.
So not much different from what the other candidates here have said. Cost of living, healthcare, housing, three big ones. So in terms of housing, we have a plan for the federal government to start building housing through the CMHC again. Let's fund that. Let's build, we saw it in the past here with the co-op homes. Let's do that. Build lots of homes quickly. Climate resilient homes, because let's face it, we're seeing more hurricanes, things like that, right? In terms of healthcare, we have a national licensing plan for family doctors so that they can go where they're most needed in the country, or use things like telemedicine, where a doctor in Northwest Territories can see someone in Cape Breton.
Chris Gallant, thank you. Jeff Evely, your priorities for Sydney-Glace Bay.
Cost of housing, cost of groceries, and employment. So as I said, the cost of housing never would have gone so high if it wasn't for mass immigration. Around here, we actually have it pretty lucky compared to other parts in the country because they're mostly students and they seem very nice. But Dave Dingwall never should have been allowed to bring so many in without providing a plan for housing. They should be in a residence so that our people don't have to compete with them in the rental market and they end up getting driven out as the cost of housing goes up. So somebody named Mike should have stopped Dave Dingwall from doing that, and now our people have to suffer so Dave can get his name on a building. As far as the employment goes, we have uranium in Nova Scotia. Europe needs uranium. They buy some from Russia. They don't want to buy it from Russia. They want to buy it from us. So we're going to reduce equalization to force the province to actually let us work and get that uranium out of the ground like they do in Saskatchewan, then are being refined in Ontario and Quebec. So what are we doing out here in Nova Scotia? Saving the world or something?
Jeff Evely, thank you, the People's Party of Canada. So that was 1 minute from each of the 7 candidates present on your priorities for Sydney-Glace Bay and what you would do to act on them. We're going to explore those ideas further in an open discussion and debate. Kicking us off is going to be you, Kim Losier, with the NDP, again, on your priorities for this riding and where you would like to go with them, and perhaps they contrast with other candidates in this riding. Kim Losier, the NDP.
Well, affordability and housing is huge. There is not enough houses for everybody. There's just not. If you've ever tried to look in the buyer's market right now, you're overpaying for pretty much everything. So being able to build sustainable homes that are affordable is important, and there's a plan in that. We need to also come up with a rent control, because a family out there, a family of 2, a single mother, cannot afford $1,500 even working for $25 an hour full-time. That's 70% of your income should not be used for housing, just to be able to pay your rent.
Anna Manley.
The answer to the affordable housing crisis is more housing. What we need to do is we need to reduce the cost of building a home. We are going to do that. Any house that's under $1.3 million will have the federal HST removed from it. That's savings of up to $65,000 for somebody when they are building a home. We will also pave the way for municipalities to decrease the time it takes for approvals and encourage them to up their build rates by 15%. That will get more homes actually built and reduce the cost of housing in Cape
Mike
Breton.
Kelloway of the Liberals.
Well, I can tell you that Mark Carney's put out a very robust plan to build 500,000 homes each year. That is really, really important. While at the same time, people are rightly to say, well, what about the people that build those homes? We don't have enough trade skilled workers, so we're investing in apprenticeship programs there. The bottom line is that right now, we've invested about $30 million, in housing locally. Partly from the Home Accelerator program, which the Conservatives voted against. So again, they talk about housing, they vote against housing. They talk about food security, they vote against food security. They talk about green jobs, they're nowhere to be found.
All right, we're going to get back to you, Anna, in a second, but first Kim Losier, and then Joe Ward, then Chris Gallant. Kim?
So you talk about 5% off a new home. So if I'm buying a home, most people are not buying a brand new built home. What they're doing is they're buying a home that's already been listed, that somebody's listed it. They're already tax-free. So how's that going to help?
What do you think is the best approach?
Why is there taxes on homes? You know, you're building that home. How many corporate builders are out here are actually building mass homes? They're not. We're talking about Cape Breton People in Cape Breton are living in modest homes as it is. They're not living in a $1.3 million home. They're not going to save $65,000.
Joe Ward?
I'm just wondering, when these guys are out knocking on all these doors, how many of the doors are on $1.3 million homes? Fiscal conservative? Let's focus the cuts on where they need to be.
A brief clarification there, Anna, before we
Up
move
to
on.
1.3 million. That also goes in your average home price, which is $200,000 in the CBRM.
Finish, Joe. Yeah.
Exactly, it's up to. We have to be more precise, especially want to be fiscal conservatives. Listen, when Pierre Poilievre has to axe the tax and do this and all these three-word slogans, he says stuff like, for every dollar we spend, we're going to cut two. Like, come on, give me the details on that. I don't trust him to put us in a better position and take care of the people that are struggling in the CBRM, not one bit.
All right, I said we're going to get Chris Gallant in there, and then we're going to hear from Mike and then Anna. Chris?
So in order to get these homes built, we need skilled tradespeople, and we want to create an immigration stream that recognizes skilled trades credentials, because we need people here to build those homes.
Okay, brevity is the soul of wit. We're running out of time. Mike Kelloway, when the Liberal Party?
Yeah, just very quickly. When Pierre Poilievre was housing minister, he built 6 homes. This year, we've invested $30 million in housing projects. Do we really want to go back to a guy who built 6 homes and that was his portfolio? I don't think so.
Anna Manley, you want to?
6 homes is better than 0. So the Liberals have promised time and time again that they're going to solve the housing crisis. This time they've promised 500,000 homes. 500,000 homes is 1,300 homes a day. That is ridiculous. That is patently ridiculous. It is not possible to build that many homes, especially not with the materials we have available and not with the trades workers that we have available. We are going to make an environment for trades workers where they can keep more of their money with their tax cut on average Canadians of 15%. We're also going to train more trade workers and also give traveling trade workers the ability to deduct their travel expenses from their taxes.
Okay, Jeff Evely.
That means the Conservatives aren't going to put the brakes on immigration. It's the demand that is the problem. The demand went through the roof, and so the prices went through the roof. The most houses we've ever built in Canada in 1 year was probably about 260,000 right after the Second World War, whereas now they're looking at 500,000. We don't have the skilled workers to do it, and the demand is the problem.
All right, we are out of time on that question on your priorities for Sydney-Glace Bay. Thanks to you all very much. Time to take a breather. We're in the home stretch here. If you're watching us on the live stream on the CBC Nova Scotia website or on the CBC YouTube channel, my name is Steve Sutherland. This is Tuesday, the 8th day of April. You're watching the CBC candidates debate for the new riding of Sydney-Glace Bay, which basically represents much of what used to be called industrial Cape Breton, including places on the north side, North Sydney, Sydney Mines, Glace Bay, New Waterford, down to Port Morion, Sydney, of course, and Glace Bay itself. Your candidates are Joe Ward, running as an independent, Mike Kelloway with the Liberal Party, Anna Manley for the CPC, Chris Gallant for the Canadian Future Party, Jeff Evely of the People's Party, Kim Losier of the NDP, Nick Boisvert of the Marxist-Leninist Party. You also have a Libertarian candidate, Michael Pittman in Sydney-Glace Bay, who is not able to be here for the event tonight. All right, up next, something that has come up tangentially a couple of times in the last few questions, so it seems timely to get to it now. We're going to begin with you, Nick Boisvert, with 1 minute from each of the candidates on immigration. So there's been an increase in the number of new faces, as pointed out, in the CBRM in recent years. And the first time in a long time, the population of the CBRM actually went up in recent years, largely due to newcomers, and largely due to the significant increase in enrollment of international students at Cape Breton University. But government has recently taken steps to reduce immigration and reduce the number of international student permits. So our question to the floor, our question when it comes to immigration, should Canada act to reduce the number of people coming to the country? What needs to be done to support the people who do come? So expanding on a conversation we've touched on a couple of different topics through the course of the evening tonight. Your question on immigration, should Canada reduce the number of immigrants? And in what way should we be acting to support the people who do come? We're starting with Nick Boisvert, 1 minute, from the Marxist-Leninist Party.
Everyone essentially here is in some way related to immigrants. Very few people here are exclusively Indigenous, so to insinuate that immigration is the problem in Canada's success is very strange to me. In matters I never thought I would discuss, I actually agree with the PPC candidate, but that's almost exclusively because David Dingwall has done everything in his power to extract as much wealth from students coming here without providing them with their needs. There should absolutely be residential services for students coming here to stay here rather than having to struggle through our insane housing market and being absolutely extorted by extortionate landlords. I definitely believe that there's an abundance of immigrants who've come here who have such skills and training that has just gone to the wayside. I've watched folks work retail for years when they're trained as pharmacists and doctors, so it behooves us to excel those programs.
And that's your minute. On immigration, Joe Ward.
I at least aspire to believe that most Canadians support immigration. The question is just timing and capacity. We don't want to bring people to Canada when we don't have the infrastructure in place for them, because it's not only our hardships, it's their hardships as well. They inherit them. So we do have to make sure that the national levels are set, that they're strategic about that we bring in people that we need to help expand our economy, and we bring in more when we're able to do so. And that includes at the local university. Scaling back enrollment was important. We had to make sure that the university is sustainable, but we also have to make sure that the community is sustainable. And for a long time, there was a question of whether or not the CBRM was sustainable at all. A very, very long time. The pressure here hurts worse than it does in other places in Canada that are performing better.
All right, Joe Ward, thank you. Mike Kelloway on whether Canada should reduce the number of immigrants and what needs to be done to support the people who do come to Canada. 1 minute, please.
Well, first and foremost, Cape Breton is an island of immigrants. If you look at Whitney Pier, you look at parts of Glace Bay, you look throughout the riding in Sydney Mines, North Sydney, it's based on immigration coming in at the turn of the 20th century, and now we see immigration creating a massive amount of opportunities here in the CBRM. At the same time, that has to be passionate and it has to be focused. It also has to be planned. And what we've done is we put a cap on immigration. And yes, we've taken some heat from certain sectors on that, but we need to make sure it's paced well and that it's effective and that it's efficient. While at the same time, we need to open our doors to newcomers who have built this island in the 20th century and are playing a huge role in the 21st century.
Mike Kelloway of the Liberals. With the Conservative Party, 1 minute on immigration from Anna Manley.
Our doors were open all right. We brought in so many Canadians that we put a significant amount of strain on our healthcare system. That we put a significant strain on our healthcare system. Also, we brought in so many people that we were unable to complete record checks on all of the people coming into Canada. We used to have the best immigration system in the world. We used to bring in people to be new Canadians and citizens of this country who were able to contribute and fill in skills gaps in this country. Instead, now we are bringing in people who cannot assist us with our economy. Okay, we need people who can contribute. That's not necessarily doctors or people like that. We need people who can work in our businesses. We do. So immigration is necessary. But if it puts stress and strain on our housing, we can't have it. We have a Blue Seal program proposed where we can qualify immigrant doctors immigrating into our country to be physicians, and that would alleviate healthcare issues and some of the strain on the healthcare. But most of it, we just need to get back to the best system on earth.
All right, that's the bell. On whether or not Canada should reduce immigration numbers and what we should be doing to support people who do come to Canada, Chris Gallant with the Canadian Future Party.
So our party supports the temporary immigration levels put in place by the current government, but we would like to see it more targeted to address our labor shortages and target for students who are seeking training in the trades. So we want to increase the number of skilled tradespeople coming in as immigrants. 30% of our immigrants should be skilled tradespeople because that's where the jobs are. That's what we need. We also want to retrain our civil servants to clear the backlog of asylum seekers and deportation cases. Those people are waiting a long time. They're draining our system while we're waiting to see if they get to stay or not. It needs to be sped up, and that's where we need to go.
Chris Gallant, thank you. Of the People's Party of Canada on immigration, Jeff Evely.
So managed immigration can be a very good thing. Mass immigration is not. And weaponized migration is a key line of attack in China's unrestricted warfare strategy. And the Chinese Communist Liberal Party of Canada is being used as a proxy to wage war on Canadians. They're not bringing the same quality of people here anymore. We've had a lot of terrorists being apprehended in the last several years. As I mentioned, there are 7 times the number of suspected terrorists crossing into the United States from Canada as there are from Mexico. They just picked up another ISIS terrorist who was on video crucifying somebody and dismembering them, and he was in Toronto plotting a terrorist attack into the United States. And we have United Front. We're absolutely polluted with them. That's the Chinese Communist Party, according to retired CSIS analyst Michel Juno-Katsoya. We have thousands of them, and they're co-opting our institutions, our business sector, and our politics.
Thank you very much. We're going to finish this first round with Kim Losier of the NDP on whether you think Canada should reduce the number of immigrants coming into the country and what supports we should be offering. Kim Losier.
It's not about reducing or increasing the amount of immigration, but it's utilizing the skills that these immigrants already have. They've came here, they're permanent residents, and they're underutilized. We have doctors, lawyers, pharmacists, skilled laborers amongst the people living in Cape Breton, yet they are sitting there and they are working in fast food restaurants. We need to take the money, we need to fund residencies. We have doctors that are already living here, but they're not trained to be doctors in Canada. We need to fund those residencies so that we can get them trained, because they're already here. Why are we underutilizing the skills workers that we already have in our own community?
Very good, Kim. Thank you very much. Kim Losier with the NDP. That finishes off this first round of 1 minute each on immigration. Once again, to focus your thoughts, we're wondering whether you think immigration should be reduced or continue to be reduced in this country, and what supports should the federal government be offering? And perhaps you can expand on that with the actions you would take as the Member of Parliament in this riding when it comes to immigration. So 4.5 minutes of open discussion and debate among your candidates, starting with Nick Boisvert of the Marxist-Leninist Party.
I want to remind folks that people who are immigrants are people who decidedly want to be here, rather than the abundance of people I've spoken to who feel like they're trapped here. These are people who deserve to be here, not just because they want to be here, but because that's a human right. It's honestly so much simpler to count these people as members of community than a problem. They are integral to building the local community.
So do you think we should reduce the number of immigrants?
I think, honestly, we've had great success with having immigrants come here, but we need to be better prepared for receiving them. We better prepare for using their skills, better prepare for housing them.
Anyone else want in on this? On immigration in Cape Breton and Sydney-Glace Bay, Mike Kelloway with the Liberals?
I thank Nick for the comment. The fact of the matter is that right now the question, let's go back to the question, what as candidates we would put forward? Well, in fact, we have put a cap this year on newcomers, but we're focusing on some things that are important. This is what we need to focus on, the way the program is designed. If you look at tourism, fishery, agriculture, healthcare, there is a need for a skill set that newcomers can bring to the table. So it is being strategic, it's being smart, but it's being compassionate and understanding and empathetic, which Cape Bretoners are.
Anyone else on the challenges around immigration? Joe Ward?
Immigration is an essential thing for our economy. It's something we want to do. We're a multicultural country. It is entirely about timing and capacity. If we can accelerate building the housing infrastructure that we need, then we can bring more people in. We don't want to create hardships for Canadians or Canadian residents, and we don't want to create hardships for new Canadian residents that are coming in. We have to be prepared.
Keep in mind, we're not just talking about immigration, but supports for immigrants. Anna Manley of the Conservative Party.
We are bringing in people who come here and struggle. They come here and struggle because the cost of living is very high, the cost of housing is very high. If we need to put in supports for those people, we need to put in the same supports that we put in for Cape Bretoners, and that's a better economy and a more prosperous Canada.
All right, Jeff Evely, then Mike Kelloway, then Joe. Jeff?
We're also bringing in an awful lot of terrorist supporters. We've seen Hamas taking over the streets of our major cities. They're chanting death to Canada in the streets. We have a real problem on our hands, a real mess to clean up. We need to deport illegals. We need to put a moratorium on immigration, at least until the housing market cools off, because the Canadian dream has been absolutely robbed from our young people. They can't afford housing, and at the same time, we have massive security threats that are a big issue for the Americans, and that's a big part of why they have an issue with us right now.
Mike Kelloway, the Liberal Party.
Well, I'll say this again, that we have put caps on immigration, but the fact of the matter is is that newcomers in the past, in particular 10 years, have brought so much to this community, have created a vibrancy of this community. Yes, it needs to be managed, which we are doing, which we're taking heat from university presidents across Canada. But it's the right thing to do, and we'll provide the supports. But it's not just the federal government, Steve. It's the municipality. It's the provincial government. And it is stakeholders in the business community as well, which they're up for the challenge.
All right, Joe Ward.
Just want to emphasize that the best support is done in advance. It is preparation for arrival, not after the fact. We have to put supports now. Food banks are one of the supports. But be prepared. When they arrive, they'll be okay.
Anna Manley of the Conservatives.
As with many things, I think you'll not be surprised to hear me say this, the market is the best way to determine. We need business owners to say, these are the types of people we need. It's not to the government of the day. The Liberals always think that they're the solution to the problem when they actually are the problem itself. We need businesses to say, this is our skills gap, these are the people we need, and for the government to act on that advice.
Nick Boisvert and then Mike Kelloway. Nick?
The market has decided housing prices, which have been absurd. I don't trust the market to decide anything.
Mike Kelloway again. Anybody else want in? Let me know.
To be honest with you, I think that there's an old motto here, or an old philosophy of laissez-faire. My Conservative candidate would be saying, let the invisible hand deal with the homeless. Let the invisible hand deal with food security. Let the invisible hand deal with investments made in green infrastructure. They'll take care of it. Government has a role, but so does private sector. It can be both, but she
almost out of time.
She basically wants you to choose. It can be both.
Last word to Anna Manley, very briefly.
Just like the budget will balance itself.
Thank you all very much for that conversation on immigration. As I mentioned, we are in the home stretch. We have 2 more questions to go, including our final question on your vision. And if I may, it is not easy to do what these 7 people are doing here tonight. It's not easy to put your name forward, to be judged, to speak in public, to speak extemporaneously in a venue like this one. I admire people who do it, so it's nowhere near as easy as it looks. So a round of applause for all your candidates in Sydney-Glace Bay here tonight. Let's talk about economic development in Cape Breton. This is always relevant when we talk about the future of Cape Breton Island and any decision that has to be made on it. We've already touched on it a couple of times through the course of the evening, so let's explore those ideas a little further. A question about economic opportunity, jobs, and the potential for growth in Sydney-Glace Bay. What untapped potential do you see? And we're going to be starting with you back in the beginning of the circuit here, Joe Ward. Maybe you'd like to talk about an initiative that you've been involved in, that you would like to build on. What specific steps will you take to encourage economic development in Sydney-Glace Bay? You can think about your history, your experience, your record. Think about opportunities that have missed or opportunities you would like to build on. Specific steps you would take to encourage economic development for Cape Breton and in this riding in particular, starting with independent candidate Joe Ward. 1 minute.
We cannot rely on large government infrastructure projects to power this economy because they come and go and the economic indicators wave with them. Sustainable development needs to happen, but we can turn a problem into a solution. We need housing, we need to develop it, but there's a hurdle that's holding developers back, and I've talked to some of the biggest ones in Atlantic Canada. The tax rates are sending the developers to Halifax. When you guys go to Costco the next time, look around. It's developing at a monumental rate. It's just extraordinary to see how they develop and how we lag. Jobs will be created if we can not have the highest property tax rates in the entire country, really. When they drop, the developers will come here. I've asked them, and when the developers come here, they create jobs. That's economic development, folks.
On your priorities when it comes to economic development for Sydney-Glace Bay, Mike Kelloway.
Well, I used to be a small business owner, and so I admire everyone on the stage that runs a small business. The fact of the matter is that we have techniques, we have measures that we need to use more. We need to invest more in ACOA to provide the quality services that small and medium-sized businesses need. We need a tax cut with respect to the middle class and the working class. That also helps businesses as well. But the fact of the matter is, and it seems like deja vu because I was here before in 2021 and 2019 when it was mentioned that the Conservative government gutted and killed ECBC. Recently, an MP from New Brunswick basically said he wants to downsize ACOA, which means downsizing services to the lifeblood of our community, which is small and medium-sized business. So again, Conservatives say one thing, do another.
Mike Kelloway of the Liberals, thank you. On steps you would take to encourage economic development in Sydney-Glace Bay with the Conservative Party, Anna Manley.
So I think we do agree again, Joe, that we're one of the most overtaxed populations in the country. Part of what we plan on doing for economic development is cutting taxes on businesses, because if you do not have a strong small business community, then you do not have a strong economy. Small business is the backbone of economy. I've been running small businesses for 15 years. I know what it takes to run those businesses. I know that taxes and also government red tape are one of the biggest hurdles to successfully running a small business and employing Cape Bretoners. And when we talk about economic development, we need to talk about thinking big, okay? We think local and we think big. When we think big, we need to think about shovel-ready zones. We need to think about reducing the hurdles between regulatory approval and developing large infrastructure projects. Large infrastructure projects by private industry, like pipelines, like mines here in Cape Breton, those need shovel-ready zones. They need to be done fast. They need to happen quickly so that they can employ Cape Bretoners.
Thank you very much, Anna. Chris Gallant of the Canadian Future Party on economic development opportunities here.
So the Canadian Future Party, one of our big platform promises is to increase military spending 2.25% immediately of our GDP spent on military. That will create a lot of jobs. It will give better pay for our service people. It will help our recruitment efforts. We can create a defense industry here in Canada, and Cape Breton can certainly take part in that. I mentioned our west to east pipeline, lots of jobs in creating that. And we need to take down the trade barriers between the provinces. That's 2% of GDP being left on the table that we're losing out on.
Very good. Chris Gallant. Jeff Evely of the People's Party of Canada, missed opportunities or priorities for you for economic development for Cape Breton and for Sydney-Glace Bay?
Well, federally, we're going to cut household taxes and business taxes. We're going to cut capital gains taxes. But specific to Cape Breton, we don't have industry. We don't have a railroad to support it. And the province, Halifax itself, is much more developed than we are because they take all the equalization funds. One other thing that we're going to do is we're going to reduce equalization gradually over time. It's a welfare trap. The province is dependent on it. And welfare traps tend to stifle innovation. Necessity is the mother of all innovation, so we're going to make it necessary for them to improve their tax base by allowing us to work. For example, we have uranium in Nova Scotia. They're mining the heck out of it out there in Saskatchewan. Europe needs it. The United States needs it. We have ports here, and we have railroads here, and we have a very serious industry that's in high demand, and they will not let us work as long as they have those equalization payments coming in.
Jeff Evely, thank you. On economic development, Kim Losier of the New Democratic Party.
Okay, so we want to boost jobs, and the best way to do that is with this green energy. We have efficient homes to come in, and we need the workers for that. So we're going to invest money into retrofitting homes, so that then will increase the jobs. We have the clean energy. That's all part of the economic plan. Federally, we're going to boost your basic personal amount, so that's going to put a few dollars in your pocket at the end of the year. But it's going to be making sure that we have the jobs here in Cape Breton, because we have the workers, we have the skills, but they have to be utilized.
Okay, Kim Losier, thank you. We finish off this first round of 1 minute each with Nick Boisvert on economic development in this riding.
A lot of folks have talked about taxes, and frankly, I am willing to be taxed to death if I can see those taxes actually working in my community rather than being spent on fossil fuel subsidies and a war in Palestine that I have no support for. Bureaucracy is obviously a nightmare to get through, so cutting red tape is great, but it also needs to be at the hands of doing things efficiently and effectively and sustainably. UBI would absolutely eliminate a bunch of the poverty problems here with the stroke of a pen. Poverty is a policy choice and we could fix it. We need to invest in public housing. Public housing would be not only a boon for the housing situation here, but it would also create so many public jobs in the amount of people that it would take to build that housing. We have initiatives like New Dawn that are actively working to solve these problems, and we need to help them out. We have so much here that we could invest in, but we're thinking country rather than local.
Nick Boisvert, thank you very much. We're going to open up this conversation now. You can use the opportunity to challenge a fellow candidate. You can introduce another idea, expand on something you spoke about before. We're going to go into 4.5 minutes of discussion debate on the opportunities for economic development in Sydney-Glace Bay. Kick us off, Joe Ward, if you would, please.
The equalization program is actually designed to eliminate itself from the receiving provinces. Do you know what that requires? It requires our economies to perform better, and to do that, the investment has to be fairly distributed. And just one quick note, in terms of industrial development, the tar ponds are over there, they're buried in concrete underneath the park. We have to be careful about how we approach industrial development. It's not that we shouldn't pursue it, but let's not just be too quick about it.
Mike Kelloway?
I love this topic of economic development. It's something that's near and dear to my heart for the last 35 years. The question is what can we be doing that is new? And I mentioned today that I focused on the importance of looking for a stronger and deeper presence of the Coast Guard. We have all the essentials here. Yes, there's Halifax, and yes, there's Quebec. But I'm telling you, this is a real opportunity if we make strategic investments. The spin-offs are really, really great. Why? Well, part and parcel, the Arctic is opening up for a lot of reasons we talked about here today. There will be commerce that takes place in terms of vessels going back and forth. Sydney, Cape Breton is poised to really be an Arctic node, an Arctic center of excellence that could bring a lot of jobs. I'm working on that as we speak.
Should I leave the rest to Mike Kelloway, or does anybody else want in? Anna Manley?
So a few things there. First, the only answer Mike Kelloway has for economic development is more government money into Cape Breton. Okay, we don't need more government money in Cape Breton. What we need is more industry. We need more businesses. We need more independence. We need to develop jobs here in Cape Breton. Okay, expanding the Coast Guard, probably wise, but I think that would be the first military spending the Liberals have undertaken in 10 years.
Okay, Jeff Evely, then Joe Ward, then Mike Kelloway again, then Kim. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we can't tax our way into prosperity with more government programs. That'd be like trying to lift standing in a bucket and trying to lift ourselves up by the handle. We do need to promote industry. And the thing is that, as I said, the equalization program means that the government would actually lose money in equalization if they were simply to allow us to work, develop our industry, because their tax base would go up, that equalization would go down, and then they would be beholden to us. And we would be in more control of our own government here in Nova Scotia.
I'm going to get Kim a chance to get back in, then you, Joe. Kim?
Oh, just talking about building businesses here in Cape Breton and utilizing the workers that we have, but it's also making sure that when you are a business and you're accepting a bid on a project that you have, that you make sure that you're picking a Canadian company first. And that's part of the NDPs, is just making sure that Canadian unions and Canadian workers are chosen first.
Okay, Joe, Mike, then Anna. Joe?
And we do have federal money coming in here that isn't handouts. We have federal agencies that are operating here. We want to make sure that they're not doing layoffs like they did recently, and I would prefer that people that work at Citizenship that want to work full-time get a full-time job, and that we're not sharing jobs. So could we make them maybe permanent, whoever is controlling this government, and get them in? And, you know, we're not asking for a handout, we're asking for jobs. Let's expand federal departments.
Mike Kelloway?
Well, I couldn't agree more on that point. The fact of the matter is I'm someone that believes government can do good things. It's important for government to be involved, but it's also important for the private sector to be involved. That's what makes a great economy. But we heard today that it's all about government handouts. So for the Canadian Coast Guard, government handout. Are the food banks and food security government handouts?
Anna Manley of the Conservative Party?
Taxes, 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 taxes. The more you spend, the more you have to tax. We have a $1.2 trillion deficit, not billion, not million, a $1.2 trillion deficit. The interest payments on that alone are $54.1 billion. That is equal to our total healthcare spend across the country. If we balance our budget, if we fix the deficit, we can spend more on healthcare. The answer is not more government spending. It's for the government to get the heck out of our way.
All right, we'll round up discussion on that point. Thank you all very much. That's our conversation on economic development for Sydney-Glace Bay. And Malcolm, I'm switching to the other microphone. I haven't seen you guys in a while. Everybody listening to us in the live stream and watching us in the live stream, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We have one more question left. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you for being a great audience and making this a conducive environment to having the kind of conversation that we were looking to have. So how about a round of applause for yourself and for the success of this evening? Thank you so much. If you want to relive any of these moments, this will survive online, as Nick pointed out earlier, forever, or for as long as you'd like to see it. If you know someone who might have missed it, you thought be interested, you can find it on the CBC Nova Scotia YouTube page where you're watching it tonight. And also we'll be logging the audio at cbc.ca/listen. Just search for Information Morning Cape Breton. And if you, like me, will be up at 5:55 tomorrow listening to the radio, you can hear our first segment. No, you're not going to be? You can hear, I won't be awake the first 5 minutes, and then I'll kind of ease in. You'll hear the first segment tomorrow in Information Morning. We'll also be broadcasting on Main Street, and you can hear us anytime at 92.1 FM in Cape Breton on Information Morning between 6 and 9. Main Street is your local show on between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock. And a reminder, too, if you have expanded your curiosity enough to go into one of the largest ridings in Nova Scotia, we're going to be in the Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre on Thursday night. We're going to do this all over again in Cape Breton, Canso, and Antigonish, the other restructured riding for Cape Breton. We'll be starting at 6:30, and if you can't make it to Port Hawkesbury, we invite you to join us online for the live stream for our debate that night. Back to this microphone, Malcolm. So finally tonight, we're inviting you to leave us with your sense of your vision for this riding, for this country, for this island, and for your potential term as our federal representative. What is your vision for the future of this riding and this island, and how are you going to get us there? We're going to kick off 1 minute from each of you. First up, Mike Kelloway of the Liberal Party.
Well, as was mentioned earlier, I'm a son of a coal miner. My parents taught me at the age of 15 to give back to the community, to do everything you can to give back to the community. So whether it was working at the Nova Scotia Community College, Cape Breton University, running my own business, and working with so many volunteer groups over the last 30, 35 years, it's been at my core belief. Every day that as an MP that I wake up, whether it's here in Sydney River or it's in Ottawa, I think about how can I help the people back home. Never forget the people that you serve. I never have. And I think I want to give some props to everyone here. Everyone is here for the right reasons. We're Cape Bretoners. We care about it. So what do I envision for Cape Breton? A prosperous place to live, to work, to raise your family, to have a good paying job, to have quality health care, to breathe fresh air, to be with family, to be with people you love. I'm committed to it every single day. I believe I have the strongest work ethic in Parliament, and I have the greatest team as well.
Mike Kelloway, thank you. Anna Manley of the Conservatives, 1 minute on your vision.
Thank you, Steve. Cape Breton is it's my home. I love it here. It's a vibrant and beautiful place, and I think that my connection to this place has become even deeper through knocking on doors and on the back porches and meeting people, meeting Cape Bretoners and talking to them, walking up and seeing how they decorate their backyards, what kind of cars they have, all that little stuff. It just builds a tapestry of a place that you can't quite appreciate when you're driving around, and it's been very special. And my vision for this place is very simple. I just want my kids to want to stay here. That's what I want. I just want my kids to want to stay here. I want to build a Cape Breton of opportunity. I am a builder. I have built businesses. I have renovated old houses. I like to build things. And the Cape Breton that I want to build for my kids, is a Cape Breton of opportunity. Thank you.
Chris Gallant.
So I have 2 children, both teenagers, and I want for them to have the opportunities that I've had here. When I graduated from high school, I didn't think I'd be able to find work here. It was a pipe dream to be able to stay in Cape Breton. I didn't think it would happen. I was one of the lucky ones in my generation that actually found work here and have been able to build a life here. I want that for them. I want that for all of our children. And we get there by working together. Nothing drives me crazier than the municipal government pointing the finger at the provincial government, who points the finger at the federal government. Like, the people put all of you there. Let's work together. Let's serve the people who elected us, and let's build a future.
Jeff Evely.
Yes, I was born and raised here, and I did go to 2 separate wars for this country because I love this place so much. And I'm back here now to try to apply the skills that I've taken over the course of my career to benefit my community. And Canada is no longer a safe place to raise children. One of the points that none of the other parties are going to talk about is the gender ideology that's being pushed on our children, where they're essentially being told that their puberty is somehow a pathology, and they're offered surgeries, and they're being marketed to them in children's books that are available in the children's section at the Sydney Library. And all 338 MPs voted to jail any parent who stands between their child and pharmaceutical industry profits. So I think that we need a Nuremberg 2 to find out exactly who got rich off of mass murder during the pandemic and who's making money off the sexual butchery of our children and the permanent medical patients to provide big pharma with livestock.
Kim Losier of the NDP, what's your vision for Sydney-Glace Bay?
I came here in 2005 on an Atlantic vacation. I ended up staying in a little place called Tower Road. If anybody knows that, it's pretty much trees. And to think that I found the beauty in that place, that in 2006 I decided to make this place my home. I moved to the hub, I lost it all. And I'm rebuilding, and now I'm back to where I started. And I've found a house and I'm living in Tower Road amongst the trees. But I want this to be a place that my son can be proud to say he calls home. I want him to go out into the world to experience life and realize that his roots are here and come back here to be able to build a life for him that I want to build for myself. And I look at government as not the enemy, but it's the tool. It's how we are going to invest in our future, in our community, and in ourselves.
Nick Boisvert of the Marxist-Leninist Party.
We don't have a whole lot of time, and I have a lot of things I didn't get to say, so I'm just gonna speed round sound clip. I believe in trans rights, as we all should, because trans kids should be trans adults. I believe in land back and Indigenous sovereignty, because that's just a no-brainer. I believe in all power to all the people, because we have lost too much of it to corporate profits. I believe in the planet before profits, and that all decisions should be made with our future generations in mind and how they intend to live on this planet. I want you all to keep up hope that better is possible, that we are capable of changing things for the better. I want you all to find community with folks who want to organize the same way you do. I want you all to feel like we can do better than this and we can thrive, and Cape Breton is capable of so much, and I believe in us.
Joe Ward, 1 minute on vision.
I think my vision is much less complex than all that. No, really, it should be straightforward. There's the ability to have growth and prosperity here, and there's some economic levers that get in our way. You know, if you can make homes affordable to build and you can make the environment good for builders to actually want to do that, jobs can happen, affordability at home can be better, and we can move forward like that. Smaller goals can be achieved, and I just get frustrated sometimes to see how easy it would be with a fair distribution of resources to us that we could immediately improve over life overnight and see these things start to happen. Super frustrating for me, but I believe it could happen. And some people may think an independent can't win. Well, I've got 9,400 votes that came with me for the mayoral race. Give me another 1,000 and I'll win this election. That's all I need. That's what the math says. So if you want to make history, you want to tip this upside down and, you know, let these guys know that it's not all about their party leaders, vote for me.
Let's keep this flow going. We have 4.5 minutes to have a continuing conversation about vision, maybe where it separates, maybe where it overlaps. And we're going to start off with Mike Kelloway, please.
Well, I think there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of differences. But the fact of the matter is I think what we've seen here tonight is that we have divergent views. We have the right wing, the real right wing, the left wing, the real left wing, and Joe, and myself. And the fact of the matter is that we all have our heart in the right place. And I want to thank everyone here for really, you know, providing a good forum for this in the CBC. I'll say this.
I think I'd like to get somebody else in. We can come back to you, Mike, unless you guys want to give Mike everything.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know that everybody's heart is in the right place. Are you one of the traders, Mike, or do you just work with them?
Well, say that again? What was that?
I didn't catch that.
The traders, those who are selling us out to China, that are working with China. I know the whole commission was a whitewash. I believe Michelle Juneau Katsoya and Sam Cooper. So are you one of the traders, or do you just work with them?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm from Glace Bay, Nova Scotia. Live in Sydney River. Been a Cape Breton my entire life. Care about this island. Have given blood, sweat, and tears to every single thing I do. I'm no trader, sir. So I think that you should take that comment back, or maybe go on the right-wing web channels that you go on.
So we know who the traders are. This is
absurd.
absurd.
I think we found the next pundit for Fox News.
Nick Boisvert on vision.
On vision? Oh, no, my vision is the same, Free Palestine. But I also feel like the fact that he's consistently talked about the Communist Party and not waved in my direction is hilarious. And I would just like to take a second to embrace that.
Joe Ward on vision.
Can you guys see now why I wanted to keep things practical? Anna says axe attacks. I'm saying send us the equalization money. We can fix things.
Anna Manley?
I think that the people we really should be thanking are the Cape Bretoners that have put up with us during this campaign and will be putting up with us for the rest of it. But no, seriously, this honestly has been a very eye-opening experience meeting Cape Bretoners at their doorsteps. I have enjoyed it very much, and if I am elected and if you trust me to be your MP, I will continue to knock on doors and listen to Cape Bretoners.
Chris Gallant of the Canadian Future Party, then back to Mike.
So it's not about whether you're on the left or the right, it's about what works. And there are good ideas on the left, there are good ideas on the right. Let's borrow from both. Let's build a strong future for all of us.
Mike Kelloway, and then Jeff Evely.
No, I'll say this. I think that what makes Canada great, what makes Cape Breton great, is that there's a divergent set of opinions. At the end of the day, this election is about who's going to keep Canada secure, who's going to make life more affordable for Canadians, who can stand across from Donald Trump. Because, folks, we're in a moment in time where we need leadership, not slogans, not bumper stickers. We need solutions. And Mark Carney can provide that because he has the track record in doing so.
Jeff Evely, then Joe, and then Kim, if you'd like to get back in on vision.
Functionally speaking, we do not have a right wing in Canada. There is no right wing in our politics. The Conservatives have reverted to their progressive roots from back in the 90s, and progressive is just a euphemistic newspeak term for a democratic socialist. I'm a liberal socialist, or sorry, they're a socialist Democrat. I'm a liberal Democrat. That's what makes me right wing, and a plane needs two wings to fly. We only have a left wing right now, so Canada is in a death spiral. We got to vote PPC to bring back the right wing so we can restore balance and pull up before we crash this thing.
Okay, Joe Ward.
I don't know, I think I lost my train of thought at death spiral, but basically, I know this is a federal election and we have to address federal issues, of course, but a candidate represents a riding, and a riding is here, and I never want to lose sight of that for any candidate. If they're successful, go forward, don't forget about us. Don't just say Pierre's lines or Mark's lines. Remember us.
Kim Losier, do you want to get back in on your vision for your home?
Well, my vision has always been that I wanted to live here because I fell in love with this island. There's something about the people here. They're strong, they're supportive, they're understanding, they're caring, and their hearts are huge. And I'm going to be here to make sure that your voices are heard.
A good note to end on. Thank you all very much. A round of applause for Joe Ward, Mike Kelloway, Anna Manley, Chris Gallant, Jeff Evely, Kim Losier, Nick Boisvert for your participation tonight. Thank you to our audience. Safe travels home through the spring snow. And also, you do have an 8th candidate in Sydney-Glace Bay, Michael Pittman, your Libertarian candidate. Thank you all very much.